Only on Action 6 News at 6. A car powered by water?
Local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
Gentlemen, this is the M12 LRV. I like to call it the Warthog.
The Halo Warthog is one of the most iconic vehicles in gaming. Having been Master Chief's trusty steed since even before Combat Evolved was released, the Warthog lends itself perfectly to both the explorative single-player gameplay and the addictingly chaotic multiplayer mode. While the appearance of the Warthog has consistently ticked the box within Halo's sandbox as an Army Guy space jeep, the audio profile of the vehicle, for better or worse, has been less consistent. But before we can answer the question of what a Warthog should sound like, we need to do a bit of research into how it works, and to do that, I had to call up an expert.
M12 Warthog, I've been told, is powered by something called a forward-housed, low-profile, liquid-cooled, hydrogen-injected ICE plant, coupled with an automatic, infinitely variable transmission.
Basically, what all this means is it runs on water. It's important to note that we're not dealing with hydrogen fuel cells here. Instead, the engine extracts hydrogen from water, which is then burned in place of gasoline and air. This is possibly inspired by the work of Stan Meyer in the wake of the 1973 oil crisis with his water-powered buggy. It's unclear whether or not his engine worked as advertised, and there is an ongoing conspiracy that the US government and/or Middle Eastern oil companies had him poisoned to protect their interest and engineer a subsequent campaign of deceit and misinformation to keep the general public in the dark about his inventions. Which is fantastic news for sound design purposes, because his car sounded like this. And a car that uses hydrogen fuel cells sounds like this. Now that we probably know what one of these engines sounds like, let's compare it to the engine notes of some Warthogs from a few different Halo games. Bear in mind, though, that Meyer's engine was taken from a VW Beetle, which is much smaller than what would be found in a military vehicle. Let's start off with the Warthog from Combat Evolved. Next up, let's hear the Halo 2 version. Moving now to Halo 4. And last up, let's take a listen to the Halo 5 Warthog.
What did you hear? Really? Me too!
To my ear, the sounds can be organized on a graph ranging from a diesel pickup truck to a NASCAR, with the Combat Evolved Warthog being the closest thing to an F-250, Halo 4's being straight out of Talladega Nights, and all of the others falling somewhere in between. The Hogs from the Bungie games all sound pretty similar, and while the sound is deeply connected with Halo for a lot of fans, myself included, it doesn't really live up to the hype of the way the Warthog looks or the crazy situations players get into while using them. And for that reason...
First person voted off the island. Tribe has spoken.
Now that 4 out of the 7.5 Warthogs we'll be discussing today have been ruled out, let's move on to the Halo 4 Warthog. Like I mentioned before, the Halo 4 Hog is at the complete opposite end of the spectrum as the Bungie Hogs when it comes to sound design. Personally, I think it's sweet to have a big old Jeep with bright red jerry cans on the back that sounds like a Sonic parking lot past 8 PM, but I think it's a little much for a Halo game. Making it sound like a muscle car makes it seem a little cheap. They could have thrown on some flames and spinners and put hot dog cannons on the roof, and it would have been more subtle than what they came up with. Just take a look at some real military ground vehicle inventories, and you'll notice a clear lack of giant super loud Jeeps being driven around by brightly colored Power Rangers. So as far as the Halo 4 Warthog goes,
it's gonna be a no for me, dog.
The Halo 5 Warthog suffers the same problem, but to a lesser extent. It sounds like a Skyline GTR, and I think it's the coolest sounding Warthog in the series, but again, the military application of a Nissan with a big old machine gun on the roof is probably a bit limited. Yeah, there is that. As cool as the Halo 5 Warthog sounds, the perfect Warthog would have elements of the classic Bungie-era Hogs as well as the more aggressive 343 sound effects. And just such a Warthog exists.
Battle up! We're moving out!
The Halo 2 Anniversary Warthog is my favorite sounding hog in the series, and I think it's a great example of what a Warthog should sound like. This thing sounds angry. You can also hear a whine sound layered into it somewhere that sounds a lot like the Bungee hogs. It sounds a lot like a supercharger actually. Just take a listen.
Come on, floor it! Oh yeah!
It's also the only Warthog that sounds like it has an infinitely variable transmission. Seriously, this thing never stops shifting. There are a few other Warthogs that I didn't mention, like the ones from Halo Landfall, Halo Legends, the Halo Wars games, and the recent Halo Infinite demo that all have their own unique sound design too. Before making this, it never really occurred to me how many different Warthog engine sounds there are. That being said, why not add one more? Just for fun, I thought I'd try to make my own Warthog engine sound effect. I don't actually know how I would incorporate this sound into gameplay. Maybe I'll figure that out one day, so I'm just syncing it up with a video clip for now. Here's what I came up with. The sound of the Warthog certainly has changed a lot over the years, and I definitely don't think that's a bad thing. The physical design of the vehicle doesn't put many limitations on the creativity of sound designers, so there are still plenty of believable and valid paths to take with it. There still isn't an established concept for the way a Warthog should sound, even with almost 20 years of Halo behind it, so I suspect the sound of the Warthog will continue to change as more games and other media are released. That's going to be it for this one. Thank you very much for watching, but I've got to run to the store and pick up some headlight fluid. See y'all later.